What if the most beautiful Christmas tree in the neighborhood became the source of a family's deepest shame? Linda Pearson stood in her driveway on a crisp December morning in Columbus, Ohio, staring at the Douglas fir tied to her SUV's roof rack. 8 feet of perfect symmetry, dense branches, the kind of tree that would make her living room look like a Hallmark movie set. Her breath misted in the cold air as she reached up to adjust the twine, feeling the rough texture of the rope against her gloves. Inside the house, her 2 kids, Tyler 9 and Zoe 6, pressed their faces against the frosted window, leaving nose prints on the glass. This tree was supposed to fix everything, make this Christmas feel normal again after the year they'd had. She didn't know yet that by Christmas Eve, this tree would still be standing in her living room, completely bare, not a single ornament, not one string of lights, and the entire street would be talking about it. The Pearsons had moved to Maple Ridge Drive in late August, just as the Ohio summer heat was finally breaking. It was one of those suburban streets where American flags hung from porches, where the smell of grilled burgers drifted between houses on Saturday afternoons, and where everyone knew everyone's business by the second week. Linda wanted that. Community, stability, the kind of neighborhood where kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on and parents gathered for impromptu driveway cocktails. Her mother, Helen, had moved with them. At 73, she was sharp as ever, still baking her legendary apple pies and keeping a garden that made neighbors stop and stare. She'd taken the converted garage apartment, giving Linda and Marcus space while staying close enough to help with the kids after Marcus's work hours got longer. Everything about Maple Ridge Drive screamed tradition. Christmas was its crown jewel. By Thanksgiving weekend, the transformation began. Every house became a canvas. The Andersons across the street erected an inflatable Santa that stood 15 feet tall, surrounded by light-up reindeer that seemed to multiply daily. The Chens next door wrapped their oak tree in thousands of white lights that twinkled like captured stars. The Hoffmans down the block went full Griswold, with icicle lights dripping from every eave and a light-up nativity scene that drew cars from other neighborhoods. Even old Mr. Kowalski, the widower at the corner, put up a simple wreath and candles in each window. The street became a destination. Families drove slowly past every evening, windows down despite the cold, kids pointing and shouting at their favorite displays. It felt like stepping into a snow globe of American Christmas dreams. But here's what nobody tells you about perfect neighborhoods. Perfection demands participation. Linda felt it immediately. The casual questions at the mailbox. When are you putting up your decorations? The helpful suggestions. There's a great light installer if you need recommendations. The friendly competitions disguised as compliments. We're going with 12,000 lights this year. What about you guys? She'd smiled, nodded, said they were taking their time, but the truth sat heavy in her chest every time she drove past another house blazing with holiday cheer. They couldn't afford it. Marcus's job transition had come with a pay cut they hadn't fully anticipated. The move itself had drained their savings, and Tyler needed braces, $1,200 down, another $50 a month. The math was simple and brutal. Decorations or groceries, lights or heat. She'd chosen survival, not spectacle. But how do you explain that to a 9-year-old who watches his classmates talk about family light-hanging traditions? How do you tell a 6-year-old that the dark house at the end of the lit street is theirs? The tree was supposed to be different. The tree was the one non-negotiable Christmas essential. They'd gone to the same lot where her father had taken her as a child, now run by his son. The smell of fresh pine and hot cocoa, the tradition of walking the rows, debating height and fullness. Tyler had chosen this one, running his hand along the branches, declaring it perfect. Marcus paid cash, $68, that made Linda wince, but seemed worth it for the light in her kids' eyes. They set it up that Sunday afternoon, the first weekend of December. Marcus wrestling it into the stand, while Tyler and Zoe cheered. Helen made hot chocolate with real whipped cream, humming "Oh, Christmas Tree" off-key. The house smelled of pine and cinnamon and promise. Then came the moment Linda had been dreading. "Where are the ornaments, Mom?" Zoe's voice was pure innocence, expectation. Linda looked at the bare tree standing in the corner by the window, visible to anyone who glanced at their house from the street. Their boxes of decorations sat in the garage, same ornaments they'd had for years, glass balls in red and gold, the star Tyler had made in kindergarten, the ceramic angels her mother had collected. Nothing spectacular, but enough, traditional, warm. But she'd made a calculation. If they decorated their tree, their house would still look barren from the outside. One lit tree in the window of an otherwise dark house, it would look sadder somehow, more obvious, like they'd given up everywhere except that one corner. At least with nothing, people might assume they celebrated differently, were minimalists, something. "I thought we'd do something special this year," Linda heard herself say. "Maybe we could make ornaments, really personal ones." Helen's eyes met hers over the kids' heads. Her mother knew. Linda could see it in the slight tightening around her mouth, the way she set down her cocoa mug a little too carefully. "That sounds lovely," Helen said, her voice steady. "I have some supplies in my apartment, felt, ribbons, that sort of thing." And so began the project that would consume their December. Every evening after dinner, the kitchen table became a craft station. Linda found tutorials on YouTube, ornaments made from popsicle sticks, felt cutouts, painted pine cones from the backyard. They used what they had: cardboard from cereal boxes, buttons from Helen's sewing kit, ribbons saved from birthday presents. The kids threw themselves into it with the unconscious enthusiasm of children who don't yet understand budget constraints. Tyler made a basketball ornament from orange felt and black marker. Zoe created an entire family of felt cats, each one slightly lopsided but distinct. Helen contributed ornaments with the precision of her generation: crocheted snowflakes stiffened with sugar water, stars folded from old Christmas cards, cinnamon stick bundles tied with plaid ribbon. But what Linda noticed as the pile grew was that these ornaments weren't beautiful enough. Not by Maple Ridge Drive standards, not compared to the themed trees she glimpsed through other windows. The Andersons had a whole nautical Christmas theme, navy and white with tiny anchor ornaments. The Chens coordinated everything in silver and blue. Even the Hoffmans' chaotic abundance had the polish of store-bought abundance. Their homemade ornaments looked like what they were: improvised, scrappy, poor. Linda couldn't bring herself to hang them. "Mom, when are we putting these on the tree?" Tyler asked one evening, holding up a cardboard star he'd covered in aluminum foil. "Soon, honey. Let's make a few more first, really fill it out." But they never seemed to have enough. She kept finding reasons to delay. "One more batch. Wait until we have more variety. Let's make sure we have the right balance." Days passed. The tree stood naked in the window. Helen didn't say anything directly, but Linda caught her mother standing by the tree sometimes, hand resting on a branch, expression unreadable. The neighborhood noticed. First came the curious looks when Linda checked the mail, then the direct questions delivered with concerned smiles. "Everything okay? Waiting for a special delivery of ornaments?" She crafted responses that sounded breezy. "We're doing a whole handmade theme this year, taking our time with it." "Oh, wonderful. Very authentic. Very intentional." The pause before intentional said everything. Tyler started getting questions at school. "How come your house doesn't have lights?" His answer, parroted from Linda, "We're doing something different this year." But he came home one day, quiet, went straight to his room. When Linda checked on him, he was lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling. "Caleb said our house looks like we forgot Christmas exists," he finally said. Linda's chest tightened. "That's not true. We have a beautiful tree right downstairs. It doesn't have anything on it." His voice was flat. "It's just there." She sat on the edge of his bed, searching for words that wouldn't be lies. "Sometimes the best things take time. All those ornaments we're making, those are special. Those mean something." I just want it to look normal. He turned to face the wall. Normal. The word lodged in Linda's throat like a stone. That night, she stood in front of the tree after the kids went to sleep. Marcus was working late again. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Christmas music from the Chen's house. Their tree glowed through the window, a beacon of everything Linda's family wasn't managing to be this year. She looked at the pile of homemade ornaments stacked in a box beside the tree. Some of them were actually charming. Zoe's felt cats had personality. Helen's crocheted snowflakes had genuine delicacy. But together, on this tree, in this window, on this street, they would announce exactly what Linda feared everyone already suspected. The Pearsons were struggling. The Pearsons couldn't keep up. The Pearsons were the family who couldn't afford Christmas. Pride is a strange thing. It makes you protect an image even when maintaining it costs more than the truth ever would. The second week of December brought the Maple Ridge Drive Cookie Exchange, a tradition Linda had heard about but hadn't experienced yet. Every woman on the street was invited to the Andersons' house. Bring 3 dozen cookies, take home a variety of everyone else's, mulled wine, holiday music, an excuse for neighbors to gather and solidify bonds before the chaos of Christmas week. Linda almost didn't go, but Helen insisted. You need connections here. Community matters. So Linda made oatmeal chocolate chip cookies, affordable, crowd-pleasing, nothing fancy, and walked across the street on a Friday evening carrying her contribution on a platter covered in foil. The Andersons' house was everything Linda's wasn't. Every surface glimmed with decoration, a white flock tree in the living room, coordinated with the nautical theme, the smell of cinnamon and pine, a fireplace actually crackling with real wood, Pottery Barn catalog perfect. 12 women gathered in kitchen and living room, drinking wine from stemware, laughing about mall parking and last-minute gift shopping stress. Linda knew names, but not many faces well. She smiled, sipped cheap Chardonnay, tried to blend in. Then Sarah Anderson, the host, made an announcement. Ladies, I have an idea for this year. She stood by the fireplace, flushed with wine and enthusiasm. You know how our street has become such a destination for light viewing. I was thinking we could make it even more special. A progressive Christmas party on the 23rd. We go from house to house. Each family hosts one element. Appetizers at one house, drinks at another, desserts at another. Show off our decorations, spread the joy, make it a real Maple Ridge Drive tradition. The room erupted in excitement, women volunteering their houses immediately. We'll do cocktails, we can handle desserts. Our house is perfect for appetizers with the new kitchen island. Linda's face froze in its pleasant expression. Everyone will participate, right? Sarah's eyes scanned the room, landing on Linda. Linda, you're in, yes? Your house is so charming. I love the craftsman style, and I've been dying to see your Christmas setup. You've been so mysterious about it. Every face turned toward her. Oh, we're actually still in the middle of decorating, doing everything handmade, so it's taking longer than expected. Perfect! Sarah clapped her hands together. Handmade Christmas theme for the party stop at your house. That's so unique. Maybe you could do the hot chocolate station. People could see your decorations and craft projects. Everyone would love that authentic homemade vibe. The authentic homemade vibe of poverty, Linda thought, but didn't say. That sounds... We'll see. I need to check with Marcus for his schedule. Oh, everyone's making it work. It's just one evening. Sarah's tone had that edge that wasn't quite pushy but definitely expected agreement. She smiled tighter. Sure, tentatively. She left the cookie exchange early, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely false. Walked home across the dark street to her dark house, where the bare tree stood in the window like an accusation. Helen was reading in the living room when Linda came in, looked up over her reading glasses. How was it? Linda set down the platter of assorted cookies, peanut butter blossoms, snickerdoodles, fancy chocolate crinkles with real Belgian chocolate, and sank on the couch. They want to do a progressive party, go from house to house. Sarah basically volunteered our house for it. And Our tree is still naked, Mom. We have no lights outside, nothing. The inside of our house looks like we're one step away from eviction, and now everyone is going to see it up close. So decorated. Helen's voice was gentle but firm. With what? With felt cats and cardboard stars? Next to the Andersons' designer tree and the Chen's silver showcase? They'll see exactly what we are. They'll know we can't afford it. Her voice cracked. Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to the tree, and picked up one of Zoe's felt cats, a lumpy gray one with mismatched button eyes. You know what I see when I look at these ornaments? She turned the cat over in her hands. I see my granddaughter spending an hour picking the perfect buttons because she wanted this cat's eyes to look thinking hard. I see Tyler watching YouTube tutorials to get the basketball stitching right because he cares about details. I see you and Marcus at this table every night making something out of nothing, making memories. Memories don't look good in a window. No, they don't. Helen set the cat down carefully. But you are breaking your children's hearts over other people's judgment. The words hit like cold water. I'm protecting them from judgment. By teaching them that what you have isn't good enough, by showing them that appearances matter more than meaning. Helen's voice stayed soft, but it carried weight. Linda, I lived through times when we made everything, when handmade wasn't rustic or authentic or a choice, it was necessity. And you know what? We were proud of it because it represented effort, love, attention. That was different, only if you make it different. Linda looked at the bare tree, at the box of ornaments beside it, at her mother standing there in the soft lamplight, one hand still resting on that lumpy felt cat. I don't want them to be ashamed, she whispered. Then stop being ashamed yourself. The truth of it settled in the room between them. That night, Linda couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to Marcus's steady breathing, staring at the ceiling, replaying Helen's words, replaying Tyler's flat voice saying he just wanted things to look normal, replaying Zoe's innocent question about when they'd decorate the tree. She got up just after midnight, padded downstairs in her robe. The house was silent. Through the window, she could see the Chen's tree glowing across the way, perfectly coordinated in its silver and blue glory. She turned on the lamp beside their tree, looked at it, really looked at it, for the first time since they'd brought it home. The branches were full and green. It smelled like winter forest and childhood anticipation. It was, objectively, a beautiful tree, and it was still waiting. Linda pulled out the box of ornaments, started unpacking them slowly. Tyler's aluminum foil stars, Zoe's felt menagerie, Helen's crocheted snowflakes, her own attempts at painted pine cones. There were probably 50 ornaments in total, more than she'd realized they'd accumulated over those craft sessions. She picked up the basketball Tyler had made, looked at it under the light. The stitching wasn't perfect, but you could tell what it was, tell that someone cared enough to get it right. She hung it on a branch in the front where it would be visible from the window. One ornament, that's all she managed that night before the vulnerability of it overwhelmed her and she went back to bed. But it was there in the morning when Tyler came down for breakfast. He stopped in the doorway, stared at his ornament hanging alone on the vast tree. You started, he said. I did. I thought maybe you could help me finish, if you want. He walked over to the box, pulled out one of his cardboard stars, hung it next to the basketball, stood back to look at it. It doesn't look like the Andersons' tree, he said finally. No, it doesn't. But it's ours. It is. He hung 3 more ornaments before he had to leave for school. Zoe added 5 felt cats when she came down. She arranged them in a family cluster, narrating their relationships as she worked. This is the mom cat, and she's teaching these baby cats how to climb trees." By the time Marcus left for work, the tree had 15 ornaments scattered across it. It still looked sparse, unfinished, but it was no longer naked. Helen came out of her apartment mid-morning, took in the progress, and simply nodded. Then she went back and returned with a box Linda hadn't seen before. "From my mother," Helen said, opening it carefully. Inside were a dozen ornaments wrapped in tissue paper. She unwrapped one, a delicate glass ball with hand-painted holly. "These are almost 80 years old. I've kept them separate, afraid they'd break. But what's the point of having beautiful things if they're always in a box?" She hung them with steady hands, spacing them throughout the tree. The vintage glass caught the window light, throwing tiny prismatic glints across the room. That afternoon, Linda finished it. She and Helen worked together, filling in the gaps with the rest of the homemade ornaments. When they finally stepped back, the tree was full, not coordinated, not themed, not matching, but alive with stories. The aluminum foil stars caught light next to antique glass. Felt cats climbed near crocheted snowflakes, cardboard creations nestled beside century-old heirlooms. It was chaotic and earnest and completely unique. And it was visible from the street. Linda tried not to check the window constantly to see if anyone noticed, but she did check. Watched cars slow down, saw neighbors walking by with their dogs, glancing towards their house. The first direct comment came from Mr. Kowalski 3 days later. He knocked on their door, which was unusual. He mostly kept to himself. "Saw your tree from the street," he said when Linda answered. He was holding a small box. "My wife, before she passed, she used to make ornaments. I have boxes of them. Can't put them all up alone. Thought maybe your family could use them. She'd like that." Inside were a dozen ornaments, crocheted bells, felt reindeer, wooden cutouts hand-painted with care, each one clearly made with love, decades ago. Linda's throat tightened. "Mr. Kowalski, I can't. These are precious." "They're meant to be seen, to be used, not sitting in my closet." He cleared his throat. "Your tree reminds me of the ones we used to have before everything got so competitive." Tyler hung Mr. Kowalski's ornaments that evening with reverent care, asking about each one. "What's this one's story?" Linda made up histories, and Tyler listened like she was reading the most important book in the world. Word spread in that mysterious way neighborhood information traveled. Not gossip exactly, just awareness. The next offering came from the Chins. Sarah Chin appeared at the door with her daughter carrying a plate of almond cookies and a small bag. "We made too many origami cranes for our tree," Sarah said. "Perfect silver ones, very on theme for us. But Lily made these." She gestured to her daughter, who held up the bag shyly. "She made these just with construction paper and crayons. Wrong colors for our tree, but maybe right for yours?" Lily pulled out paper cranes in red, green, yellow, vibrant and childish and wonderful. "I made them at school," she said, "but Mommy said they don't match our tree." Linda looked at Sarah Chin, at her perfect Christmas setup, her coordinated theme, and saw a flicker of something unexpected. Regret? Longing? "They're perfect for our tree," Linda said. "Would you like to help hang them, Lily?" The girl's face lit up. She and Zoe spent 20 minutes arranging the cranes throughout the tree, narrating elaborate stories about where each bird was flying. After they left, Helen said quietly, "Everyone's doing the same thing, hiding the real parts, displaying the polished parts." "What do you mean?" "Sarah Chin's tree is beautiful, but her daughter couldn't put her own ornaments on it because they didn't match the aesthetic. How do you think that feels, being 6 years old?" Linda hadn't thought about it that way. More ornaments arrived over the next week. The Hoffmans brought over extras from their massive collection, vintage bulbs they'd replaced with LED but couldn't throw away. "These still work. Seem wrong to waste." Mrs. Anderson quietly dropped off a bag of ribbon and told Linda she admired the handmade approach, that she'd been thinking about doing something less commercial next year. Even families Linda barely knew stopped by. The Martins from 2 streets over, who'd heard about the community tree through school connections. The Patels from the corner house, who'd been feeling isolated as one of the few non-Christian families and appreciated how inclusive the casual craft approach felt. The tree became a living, growing thing, a collaboration, a conversation piece. But here's what Linda didn't expect. The judgment didn't disappear. It shifted. Some neighbors still made comments that landed wrong. "Oh, you're really committing to the rustic vibe. So brave to just embrace the budget aesthetic." The words were supportive on the surface, condescending underneath. But Linda found she cared less, because every time she looked at that tree, she saw something different now. She saw her kids coming home from school and immediately checking if anything new had been added, saw Tyler explaining the story of Mr. Kowalski's wooden cutouts to his friend who came over, saw Zoe telling anyone who'd listen about the flying cranes and their adventures. The tree wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and now it was also partly their neighbors, partly the streets, partly a story bigger than one family's Christmas. The Progressive Party happened on December 23rd as planned. Linda spent the whole day in an anxious preparation. She made hot chocolate from scratch with Helen's recipe, real cocoa, whole milk, vanilla, and cinnamon sticks, set up a station in the kitchen with marshmallows, whipped cream, and peppermint sticks, cleaned the house with an inch of its life. The tree stood in the living room, visible from the entry hall, impossible to miss or ignore. When the party arrived, 15 neighbors moving as a group from house to house, warm and buzzed and holiday-spirited, Linda held her breath as they crowded into her home. There was a moment of silence as people took in the tree. Linda felt Marcus's hand find hers, squeezed tight. Then Mrs. Anderson, Sarah's in-laws, spoke first. She was 70-something, a woman who'd lived on this street for 40 years. "Now this," she said, walking closer to the tree, "this is what Christmas used to look like before it became a competition." She touched one of Helen's crocheted snowflakes gently. "My mother made these. I haven't seen them in years." Her voice caught. "Everything's gotten so sterile, so perfect. I forgot it could feel like this." Other voices joined in, people pointing out ornaments, asking about origins, sharing their own memories of homemade Christmases. Lily dragged her mother over to show her which cranes she'd hung. Tyler and his friend gave a full tour, explaining the story behind nearly every ornament. The hot chocolate station was a hit, but the tree was the star. And Linda realized something as she watched neighbors gathered around it, sharing stories, touching ornaments with gentle hands. She thought she was hiding poverty, but what she'd actually created was intimacy, permission for imperfection, a space where people could contribute their cast-offs and have them valued, where commercial didn't win by default, where effort and story mattered more than coordination and expense. The party moved on to the next house eventually, but people lingered at the Pearsons longer than planned, took second cups of cocoa, stood in front of that tree like it was offering something they hadn't realized they were hungry for. After everyone left, the house fell quiet. Linda stood in the living room, surveying the aftermath, empty cups, a few dropped marshmallows, the smell of chocolate and cinnamon still hanging in the air. "You were right," she said to Helen, who was loading the dishwasher. "About what?" "Of all of it," Linda said. She looked at the tree. "I thought I was protecting the kids from judgment, but I was really protecting myself, my own shame about what we can't afford." Helen dried her hands, came to stand beside Linda. "And now?" "Now I see what we can afford. This," she gestured at the tree, "connection, creativity, meaning." "Those were always more valuable," Helen said. She put her arm around Linda. "You just had to remember." Christmas morning came with snow, light, pretty flakes that made Maple Ridge Drive look like a movie set. The kids came downstairs early, as kids do, racing to see what Santa had brought. The presents under the tree were modest, wrapped in newspaper comics and twine because Linda had run out of wrapping paper and discovered that newsprint had its own charm. Tyler got the basketball hoop they'd found used on Facebook Marketplace and refinished. Zoe got a dollhouse Marcus had built from scrap wood, unpainted but sturdy, waiting for her imagination to finish it. They didn't notice what the gifts cost. They noticed that they were chosen with attention, made with care. But the moment Linda remembered most happened just before lunch. She was in the kitchen with Helen, preparing the Christmas meal. Nothing fancy, just a roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, the kind of food that smells like home. And Tyler appeared in the doorway.
Mom, can we keep the tree up longer than usual this year? Why is that? Because I don't want to forget it. He looked back toward the living room where the tree stood in its mismatched glory. And because people keep stopping by to see it. Mr. Kowalski came by this morning just to look at the tree through the window. I saw him from my room. Linda felt something in her chest expand and settle simultaneously. Yeah, buddy, we can keep it up as long as you want. After he left, Helen said quietly, "That tree taught him something about value." "What's that?" "That the most important things can't be bought. They're built, piece by piece, person by person." Linda looked out the kitchen window at the snow falling on Maple Ridge Drive, at the houses still blazing with their competitive lights, at the perfect displays and coordinated themes and expensive abundance. And she felt for the first time all season grateful for what they didn't have, because what they didn't have had forced them to discover what they did: a tree that told a story, a family that created together, neighbors who contributed their cast-offs and memories, kids who learned that beauty could be handmade and valuable without being expensive. The Pearsons' tree became a minor legend on Maple Ridge Drive that year. People talked about it after Christmas, referenced it in passing. "Remember that tree the new family did, with all the different ornaments from everyone?" Some people still whispered it was necessity disguised as choice. They weren't entirely wrong. But what they missed was how necessity, when met with creativity instead of shame, can become something better than abundance. January came. The other houses took down their lights in efficient weekends. Inflatable Santas deflated. Themed trees came down, ornaments packed carefully back into labeled bins, everything stored away until next year's display. The Pearsons' tree stayed up until mid-January, not because they forgot, because people kept stopping by. Mr. Kowalski came over twice more just to stand in their living room and look at his late wife's ornaments on their tree. Lily Chin brought her grandmother to see the cranes. Neighbors who contributed ornaments wanted to see them one more time in context. When they finally took it down, Linda and the kids packed each ornament with care. But this time, there was no shame in the box, just gratitude for what those simple creations had revealed. That a bare tree can become beautiful not despite its emptiness, but because of what that emptiness invites people to fill. That community isn't built on perfection, it's built on vulnerability, on showing what's real instead of what's polished. That the best stories aren't the ones where everything goes according to plan, they're the ones where limitations force you to discover what actually matters. And that sometimes the Christmas miracle isn't abundance, it's the courage to share scarcity and watch it transform into something richer than plenty. Years later, Tyler would tell his own kids about that tree, about the Christmas their family couldn't afford decorations and ended up with the most meaningful tree they'd ever had. about how a bare tree in a window became a neighborhood touchstone, about how his grandmother's words, "Stop being ashamed yourself," changed the way his mother showed up in the world. He wouldn't remember it as the year they were poor. He'd remember it as the year they were brave. And in her 70s, in her own home, Linda would keep a box of those original ornaments, the felt cats, now worn, the aluminum foil stars, now tarnished, Tyler's basketball, Zoe's cranes from Lily Chin, Mr. Kowalski's wooden cutouts, inherited after he passed, a gift in his will. She'd pull them out sometimes when her own grandchildren visited, tell them about the tree that refused to shine until it learned that beauty and brightness aren't the same thing, that the most memorable light doesn't come from a strand of LEDs, it comes from the courage to be seen exactly as you are and the grace to let others contribute to your story. Because that's what Christmas is underneath all the commercial gloss and competitive display, an invitation to share, to contribute, to make something together that none of us could make alone. A bare tree isn't empty if it's waiting. It's just patient, knowing that the best ornaments aren't bought, they're given, earned, made from what you have by people who care enough to see what you need. And that's the kind of beauty that lasts long after the season ends, the kind that teaches children that they're rich in the things that matter, even when money is tight, the kind that builds communities instead of showcases, the kind that turns a simple Douglas fir in a Columbus suburb into a reminder that vulnerability, when met with courage and community, doesn't diminish you. It makes you whole.